welcome to Gamecock Pod Live.
For the next 3 to 4 years, I'll be committed to the University of...
This is Rodgers again to the 25, 20, 15, 10. Rodgers scores!
Jackie Bradley Jr. delivers for the Gamecocks. Lost it up, looking for Kelly. Touchdown! Can you believe it?
And South Carolina is sending shockwaves through the SEC.
Frederick! Lays it in at the buzzer! That's a win! Unbelievable! I don't believe it!
And now, live from Studio 54 of the Gamecock Pod Studios, here's the Cockfather himself, Keith Alsep.
All right, everybody, welcome into Gamecock Pod Live for April 19th, episode number 1203. And let's jump right into your Nana's Porch news, notes, and headlines. Nana's Porch is a full-service catering company in the greater Charlotte area, whether it's banquets, corporate events, golf tournaments, weddings, or just a big backyard bash with the whole hog barbecue. Whatever you need, Nana's Porch has got you covered. Maybe it's a corporate event where you're having a bunch of food trucks. Well, Nana's Porch food truck named top 3 in food trailers in the Charlotte local newspaper poll, and their pimento cheese, which I cannot wait to try at my next Gamecock football tailgate, voted number 1 in the meat and cheese category by the North Carolina Specialty Foods Association. Go and check out my good friend Chris Payne at nanasporch.com. Also, jump into the Nana's Porch chat box. Lots of stuff is popping. Last night, Shane Beamer issued not 1, but 2 welcome homes. Then this morning, there was a 3rd welcome home. 2 of those welcome homes have now been revealed, both in the last hour and both basically at the same time. And that is 6'7", 315 pounds, Big Mike Williams, Charles Herbert Flowers High School in the DMV. It's another hashtag DMV forever to thee. Williams chooses the Gamecocks over Miami and Michigan State. Those were the final 3 for him, but he had a lot more offers. I mean, you look at this guy, Arkansas, Maryland, Florida, Tennessee, Southern Cal, and others all wanted Big Mike Williams. After another trip to Columbia for the Garnet and Black spring game, he chooses the Gamecocks. And I think even before he put his up, no real surprise here, 4-star safety from West Florence High School, Kelvin Hunter, 5'11", 180. He chooses the Gamecocks over Auburn, Michigan, Virginia Tech, and Kentucky. I never thought he would make it to the June visit list uncommitted. And so he is rated as the number 2 player in South Carolina. I would have him number 3 personally. South Carolina now with 9 commitments up to number 5 in the On3 rankings, up to number 7 in the 24/7 Sports Composite rankings. But there is one more 4-star welcome home out there that has yet to announce. Hopefully by the end of the show, we have the 3rd welcome home. I'm going to depend on you guys in the Nana's Porch chat box, which is hopping today, which is great to see. Clint, Ryan, and others in the Nana's Porch chat box. We're live on YouTube and Twitter, so go check us out. My personal ranking of the in-state commitments for South Carolina would be number 1, Josiah Thompson. Looks like Brayden Lee will jump at 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Central, which will be right before we go off the air. So appreciate that, Clint. When Dante Reno tweeted out last night, can't wait to go against that one, I had a feeling it was Brayden Lee. That would jump the Gamecocks up either to number 3 or 4 in the On3 rankings and into the top 5 in 247sports.com. But back to South Carolina prospects. To me, Josiah Thompson is the number 1 prospect in the state. 6'7", 275. By the way, a little bit later this afternoon, I am recording an interview with Kevin Roller, the head coach at Dillon High School, and Josiah Thompson, which will air on the Big Thursday show. So look forward to that. But I love Josiah Thompson. He's long, he's lean, he's 6'7", 280 pounds. He can really bend. You'll hear more from Coach Roller on Josiah Thompson tomorrow. I think he could end up being the number 1 offensive lineman in the class of 2024, and he will enroll mid-year. For me, I've got Cam Pringle at number 2. You can't have that offer list, and you can't have all those schools beating down your door and have that size. I mean, he's 6'7", 330 pounds, maybe 6'6", 330, maybe 315, I think is what his coach said after basketball season. Then I would have Hunter at number 3, Mazio Bennett at number 4, and Blake Franks at number 5. That's my in-state rankings. Also, Eli Merck at Daniel High School, the son of my good friend, Dr. Danny Merck, who is the superintendent of schools in Pickens County. His son, with great bloodlines, Danny played quarterback, point guard. He did it all. He was a 2-sport star at Wofford as well. And so Eli Merck, I've heard, could rival Mazio Bennett for the top wide receiver in the state of South Carolina. And there are more welcome homes on deck. 4-star wide receiver Jonathan Paylor. 4-star running backs Daniel Hill, 6'1", 220, out of Meridian, Mississippi, and 4-star running back Anthony Carey from Tampa, Florida. All those guys have recent crystal balls to South Carolina. I like all those guys a lot. I mean, you're looking at a historic start here. So let's go back to, I think it's 2014. South Carolina had the number 2 recruiting class in the country going into that season. And then Steve Spurrier made that comment about, yeah, well, I might only be around for a couple more years. And the class fell apart. That's the last time South Carolina has had this type of momentum. And so here's what you hope is off of this last class, off of this incoming class, okay, you're putting together classes that could lead you to some, 9, 10, 11 win seasons, which could then, I think this coaching staff would really take advantage of that. I thought Steve Spurrier's staff, Spurrier Jr., Whammy, and Sean Elliott, and a lot of those guys, they got lazy. And when South Carolina was winning and going 11-2 and beating Nebraska, Michigan, and Wisconsin, and Connor Shaw and Bruce Ellington and Jadeveon Clowney and Kelsey Quarles and all those guys were going off, Dabo Swinney was putting together great recruiting classes at Clemson. The state of South Carolina took a downward turn, and Spurrier's staff was incapable of signing big-time players from outside of the state of South Carolina. This staff is not. Dawn Staley's staff has proven you don't just win with South Carolina players. You build your program with South Carolina players, then you go all over the country and get the best players in the country, and you win big. That's what she's done. Now South Carolina is cycling back up. More South Carolina players, this staff in South Carolina, Georgia, Florida, the DMV, now with Jody Wright, they're branching out into Alabama and Mississippi. Up in the Northeast, okay, above the DMV, Jordan Thomas, a big 4-star defensive tackle from New Jersey who grew up in Eastover, South Carolina. His grandmother still lives there. There's a great opportunity that he could be part of this class. He was on campus all weekend. That's a guy to follow. If South Carolina decides to go on Greer Riverside defensive tackle Marcus Downs, I think that is a guy that could jump in the boat. And I just think the sky's the limit, and you build your class with great players, but you also sign guys like Nick Emanwari and DQ Smith, and from all accounts, Judge Collier is going to be that under-the-radar guy in this freshman class, along with Jaden Kilgore, who, as you guys know that are patrons of my podcast, Hale McGranahan and I have been standing up on the soapbox ever since last spring about this guy. You saw it in the spring game. Jalen Kilgore is a stud, okay? But you get the 3-star guys as well that develop like a Blake Franks, okay, like the DQ Smiths and Emanwaris and Judge Colliers. And you add them to guys like Nicholas Harbor and perhaps Dylan Stewart. Okay, Thompson is a 5-star. Pringle is a 5-star. I mean, it could be happening. King Joseph Edwards. I mean, there are a lot of guys that South Carolina has huge momentum with that could end up being 5-star or borderline 5-star players. Dylan Stewart right now, the number 1 player by On3 Sports. So a lot of great stuff happening with football recruiting. I got to check my phone because I think Mike Uva may be running a little bit late. Up. Well, looks like Uva has got to do another video. And so we may not be able to get Mike back. But I'm just going to send him a message and just have him pop on whenever he can. All right. So back to Nana's Porch news, notes, and headlines. Clint, great stuff. I'm assuming you were talking about Josiah Thompson, but maybe Cam Pringle. I love both of those guys, by the way. All right. So Gamecock baseball. Downs Charleston Southern last night 10-4. A late power surge. Eli Jersenbeck did not have his best stuff. He gave up 4 runs in the first 2 innings. But the Gamecocks pulled away late and won 10-4 to move to 31-6 ahead of a critical. After you kicked away at least one of those 2 games you lost in Vanderbilt with bad defense and walks, this Florida series is really critical. If you can get 2 out of 3 and you go 3-3 against Florida and Vanderbilt, I really think that solidifies a top 8 seed moving down the stretch. Gamecocks broke open that tie with home runs in the 7th and 8th inning. Actually, Dylan Brewer and Gavin Cassis both had 2-run homers in the 6th and 7th inning. That made it 8-4. Gamecocks added 2 runs in the 8th. And the bullpen, after Jersenbeck went out, they combined for a 1-hitter with 9 strikeouts and 2 walks, and the defense played errorless ball behind them. And so Florida is on deck. And so I got to say, all right, the Florida closer last weekend, if you saw the video, he strikes out a guy and he kind of screams and flexes at the opponent's dugout. And the umpire immediately pulled his mask off, came out, and tossed him. Okay. I get it. That is unsportsmanlike conduct. But to have a 4-game suspension when you're in a close, tight game, and the other team's undoubtedly been talking shit, okay, and razzing him. And he just turns and flexes and screams and doesn't scream, hey, MFer, take that or whatever. You could see there was no foul language or real trash talk. He was just jacked up. To suspend him for 4 games, I don't agree with, but with the Gamecocks having the next 3 games, well, I guess Florida had a midweek game. So he's out this weekend. As a Gamecock fan, even though you're going to be without Noah Hall, I think you have to like that. So Gamecocks, it looks like it will be Sanders, Mahoney, and then TBD, which will probably be Johnny Holstaff. That series is Thursday, Friday, Saturday. So make sure you plan accordingly for that. It's supposed to rain here on Thursday. I've got some games scheduled, but I think those are going to get rained out. All right, so yesterday, for patrons who listen to Gamecock Pod daily, all right, I went over men's basketball. Okay, they just added Miles Stute from Vanderbilt, 6'7", 215, one of the top guys in the transfer portal, one of the top 3-point shooters in the country. Not this season, but last season, he led the SEC in 3-point shooting. He shot over 43%, 79 of 183. That's .432. This past season, that dipped a little bit, probably because everybody was running at him. Also, his time dipped. Only played about 20 minutes a game, averaged 8 points a game. Vanderbilt, Jerry Stackhouse, they moved him more to a stretch 4 when he wants to be a small forward, which is really what he is. He's a 3-and-D guy. If you watch the NBA like I do, the playoffs are on, and they are magnificent. Lamont Paris and his staff have sold Miles Stute on working with him on shooting off the dribble, working on getting in to the mid-range game, and being able to take your guy to the rack off the dribble. I think he has a very strong record of developing guys. I thought you saw a lot of really good development from all of South Carolina's players this past season, particularly some of the younger players like Jacoby Wright, like Michie Johnson, like Zachary Davis. Josh Gray got a lot better. So now the Gamecocks have 2 spots left, and it's coming down to the wire with Mustafa Amsel, who is a 6'10" power forward who plays at Dayton. He's originally from Finland. Lamont Paris has a great connection with the coach that runs that basketball academy over there. Gamecocks are in the mix for 2 2024 guys from over there. One will announce on the 22nd. Okay, that's the guard. That's not Federico, but the guard is going to go ahead and announce on the 22nd. Amsel, he could announce before then. And then this weekend, you've got BJ Mack, 6'8", 250, probably your most high priority guy. First team's also a native of Charlotte. He just visited Iowa. Okay, he's visited Alabama. He's visited other places. He's got a visit on deck for Arkansas. I don't know if he's going to take that, but there's a lot of momentum with South Carolina. And so yesterday I went over what I thought would be the depth chart if the Gamecocks land Mustafa Amzil and BJ Mack. And I omitted Stephen Clark, who is the transfer forward from the Citadel. And so here's my projected depth chart, and then we're going to get back to more football because it's really pressing. So I think Talon Cooper, the transfer point guard from Minnesota, 6'4", he was sixth in the NCAA in assists per game on a really bad team. He averaged 6.3 assists per game. I think that allows Meechie Johnson to move to the small forward. Miles Stute becomes your small forward. And then Mustafa Amzil and BJ Mack rounded out. Okay, then I think Abrima Deba can be your backup point guard. He could also play some small forward. I like Jacoby Wright better off the ball. He was a really good spot-up three-point shooter, but a turnover machine at point guard. Clark, probably your backup small forward and also a guy that could swing to power forward to give you a guy that can stretch the floor. But I also wouldn't count out Zachary Davis. I think he's going to make a big jump. He is a very skilled 6'8" guy that was a point guard in high school. And then I think Colin Murray Boyles, who's up to number 60 in the ESPN rankings, how great of an early evaluation was that for Lamont Paris and staff to get him signed, sealed, and delivered before he ever played a game out in Utah, because this guy, his stock has risen maybe as much or more than anybody else in the country. At 6'7", 220, he's going to come in ready to play. And then you still got Josh Gray at 7 foot 270, who is unlike anybody else on the roster, who really got a lot better and who I think will continue to get better. And so back to the Nanas chat box, Clint, I agree. If South Carolina can close out this portal group with Mack and Amzil, I think that is a very I think you go into next season with expectations, but an excited fan base and a much improved roster. I mean, a much, much, much improved roster and guys that have all produced in college. I mean, you're looking at all 5 of your starters being transfer portal guys that you've acquired since you've been at South Carolina, with Cooper, Johnson, Stute, Amzil, and Mack, and then Abrima Deba also factoring in there, as well as Stephen Clark. So, I mean, 7 of your top 9 or 10 guys are going to be transfer portal guys. And, you know, with the shape Frank Martin left the program in and the mass exodus of guys, that's just how you've had to do it. All right, so we are going to take a break, and then we're going to be back and we're going to dive into South Carolina football, the spring game, more recruiting, portal talk for the next window, and Mike Uva hopefully will be able to join us.
If you enjoy listening and watching the free Wednesday show, now live streaming on YouTube, and would love more Gamecock Pod daily, join our growing Gamecock family by becoming a monthly or annual subscriber. You'll be able to listen to the show every day of the week and listen to guests like J.C. Sherbert, Hale McGranahan, and John Whittle from thebigspur.com, Colin Taylor and Mike Uva from Gamecock Central, Emily Adams from the Greenville News, Ben Portnoy, Michael Lanana, and Jeremiah Holloway from GoGamecocks.com, Michael W. Bratton, the host of That SEC podcast, and many, many more. As a VIP subscriber, you can join or listen to the weekly live Zoom call with up to 100 of your favorite Gamecocks and friends. After the show is an unrecorded overtime segment where the real scoop gets dropped and discussed. It's like going down to your local pub or sports bar and having a conversation with your Gamecock friends about last week's football game, men's and women's basketball games, and Gamecock baseball. And of course, there's always recruiting to discuss. In addition to the weekly Zoom call, VIP subscribers get the most popular podcast, The Morning After, which is released every Sunday morning during football season, and more VIP perks are in the works. Follow Keith on Twitter at KAllset, or follow the show on Twitter at GamecockPod. Go to the top of the homepage and follow the link. If all else fails, go to patreon.com/GamecockPod Daily. Join now and get up to 3 months free off an annual VIP subscription. You will love it, guaranteed. Now, back to Gamecock Pod Live.
All right, and we are back. And so Brayden Lee says, I have a special message I want the world to know. I will be going live at 2 p.m. Eastern on Instagram to tell it. Trust me, you don't want to miss it. And so I do believe that will be the third welcome home, and it'll be not a 2 for Tuesday, but a 3 for Wednesday. Well, I guess there was 2 for Tuesday last night. If you remember on the Big Spur, Brian Dawn, who does the Northeast, he came on with 2 crystal balls for the Gamecocks, and it was Mike Williams and Brayden Lee. Then Kelvin Hunter announces his noon Eastern decision this morning. Shane Beamer issues the third welcome home. And so I think we will know in about 30 minutes what Brayden Lee is talking about. I do expect this to be South Carolina. I'm not trying to steal his thunder, but when you think about it, his dad's just passed away. He hasn't done anything with recruiting. And then he and Mike Williams and a group of dudes from the DMV, they come down, spend the weekend again. Okay, they documented their trip on social media, put up a video of it. The last time they came down for the Junior Day weekend, to get them back, that's probably like the only places he's been. You've got Torian Gray, the number 1 defensive back coach in the country. And I mean, it just makes too much sense, right? And then you got Dylan Stewart, who yesterday about 3 o'clock, he posts the 18-second video of him in the Gamecock uniform. I mean, I'm with JC. I think you probably don't want him to commit, although I do disagree. I don't think it's like Robert Kimdichie, because the coach at Grayson at the time is Dabo's roommate, Mickey Kahn. He's now on staff at Clemson. He took a bunch of those guys over there they got Robert Kimdichie in a room and pressured him into committing without his parents even knowing he was going over there, or much less that they were trying to get him to commit. Plus, Ole Miss had Robert Kimdichie's younger brother, who turned out to be a hell of a nickelback, or would have been a great spur at South Carolina at the time. And one, it really pissed off Robert Kimdichie's mom, and she was having no part of it. So I think that's a lot different deal, but I do think it'll go to December. I think Stewart will probably have ESPN there at Charles Herbert Flowers High School, along with Brian Dawn, along with probably, all the insiders from the top schools will be there. I think it's South Carolina, Georgia, Ohio State, Alabama. You can't ever count them out. But right now, I just think South Carolina has a ton of momentum. Even if you don't get him, you get these two guys. There are other guys up there. There's another defensive end from the DMV that visited that South Carolina likes a lot. There are plenty of guys in Georgia. Guys will emerge in Florida. But I really like where South Carolina is right now with Dylan Stewart and Brayden Lee, and so that's going to come down. All right, so getting into the spring game. Obviously, very vanilla, not everything you want. You'd like to see more. A lot of guys were missing. Like on defense, Jordan Strong, Mo Kaba, Tonka Hemingway, David Spalding. That's 4 starters you probably, that will be starting on the defense. I like what Clayton White did with the defensive front, playing 3 bigger defensive linemen and then playing a guy like Brian Thomas Jr. standing up, a guy like Donovan Westmoreland, even Terrell Dawkins out standing up in space. Then you saw Jaron Willis kind of playing out there. I think that could be a good spot for him. I did like what I saw from Stone Blanton, from Bam Martin Scott, and Pup Howard. But as I said on Monday on Inside the Gamecocks, the show, I could see him being that stand-up buck guy if you don't hit on the guys you want, at least on third down. I think he would be a hell of a pass rusher out there, but I do think he could play in space. And so, if you got Tonka Hemingway and TJ Sanders and Boogie Huntley out there at the same time, and you got one of those guys, Brian Thomas Jr., Jordan Strong, I do think Desmond Umeozulu, I would have liked to seen him and see what he looks like. I think he's going to come on. But there's a lot of big bodies up front on that defensive front to like. I mean, Jamal Weish, Xavier McLeod, Nick Barrett. Gamecocks have numbers there. So I like it. But we got to talk about this. On the offensive line, Jalen Nichols going down. In all likelihood, he's going to miss the entire season. And so, next man up at left tackle. And so, I think what you will see is Ja'Kai Moore, probably pencil him in right now as the number 1 left tackle. Don't count out big Sidney Fugar, though. And in the transfer portal, there are guys South Carolina offered a guy yesterday from the transfer portal. And so we'll just have to wait and see what happens there. But this guy's like 6'4", 305. And he's a native of Arkansas. The pit boss may be tough to beat on that one. But, quite frankly, if you're the Gamecocks, I think you got to take a look at that. I've said, other than quarterback and probably tight end on offense, I think you would take, right, like you want one or two guys at running back in the portal. You would love to add another big-time playmaker at wide receiver. And I think now if you could find an experienced left tackle that you could just plug and play, I think you would take him. Because then maybe Ja'Kai Moore can stay at left guard. Okay, you have either Vershawn Lee or Nick Gargiulo at center and the other one at right guard, and then you have Tyshawn Wanamaker at right tackle. So I think there, are a lot of possibilities. It could be Ja'Kai Moore at left tackle, Gargiulo or Vershawn Lee at left guard, and then the other one at center. And then I think Marquis Anderson and Trey Jones fight it out at right guard, and Wanamaker plays right tackle. Maybe you push Wanamaker inside at right guard and Fugar plays right tackle. Lots of intriguing possibilities for sure on that offensive line. But to me, the stars of the spring game, Trey Knox, I'm agreeing 1,000% with Shane Beamer. They have definitely upgraded the tight end position. Trey Knox and Joshua Simon, number 1 and number 6 in your program, those are NFL guys at tight end. They're long, they're lean, they're like bigger wide receivers. And Trey Knox, did you guys watch the post-game interview with him? That guy's shoulders are humongous. My God. He looked like a bodybuilder. I mean, he runs like a deer. He's got a high football IQ. And, Joshua Simon is a guy that if the Gamecocks had not signed Nicholas Harbor, Joshua Simon was going to be working with Justin Stepp at wide receiver this spring. Did you know that? Yeah, Clint, no doubt about it. He is a big boy there. Clint is chiming in the Nana's Porch chat box, sponsored by nanasporch.com. Go check them out. I love those guys. Obviously, you know what you can expect from Juice Wells. I think Eddie Lewis is a plug-and-play guy and a Josh Vann replacement. He'll probably be your punt returner. He's your third or fourth wide receiver, depending on if you add another guy. I think South Carolina will add another guy at wide receiver. And I think there's a certain player out there that used to be at Oklahoma with Spencer Rattler who had to leave there. He could quietly just tiptoe in the door. Remember when you were in high school and you missed curfew and you came in late and you just opened the door ever so slightly to try to not make it squeak or make noise, and then tiptoe in. Maybe you took your shoes off so your parents wouldn't know, and you try to sneak in your room. I think that's what the Gamecocks are planning on doing. Clint again chiming in. I would not mind at all seeing Bakari Swain as a punt or kickoff returner. Depending on how valuable they think Xavier Legette is as a wide receiver. I mean, you got Juju McDowell, who's also proven to be an excellent kickoff returner. But Clint, other than Nicholas Harbor, Bakari Swain to me is the most dynamic offensive playmaker coming in this class. I know he's not going to play wide receiver, so maybe you would see him as a punt returner, even though I think wide receiver is still his impact position for this coming season. It sounds like he will be at corner, which they do need more numbers there. But I have heard great things about Judge Collier. I think he is the next guy, just like DQ Smith, that's going to come out of nowhere, and Nick Eamon-Warry, and make an impact. I don't think he'll be a starter this year, barring an injury, because I do think O'Donnell Fortune and Marcellus Dial have those spots nailed down. I also like Emory Floyd a lot. But who's to say the Gamecocks, I mean, they've already reached out to a guy from Georgia Southern who had 101 tackles this past year, played his high school ball in Columbia at Spring Valley, was second on the team in tackles. Wouldn't be surprised if a big-time corner or safety that can help solidify, that wants to come home, like this guy, you'd take him. Okay, the Gamecocks are going to take a linebacker if they can get one. They're going to take a couple of defensive ends if they get one. I think they would take a big nose guard like Tank Booker that they tried to get if they could get one. So I don't think there's any position. Hell, they may even take a long snapper, because I've seen some experienced long snappers in the portal with multiple years of eligibility available. So really, I think other than quarterback and tight end, those are the only two positions on the roster where you probably are not looking to add a guy in May. Let me pose this question to you for the Nana's Porch chat box. What if Brock Vandegrift decides, well, I'm not starting at Georgia, I'm bailing out, and I'm a Georgia guy, and Shane Beamer, he really recruited me hard. I know Spencer Rattler's the guy this year, but maybe I can be the guy next year. And if, as expected, South Carolina has one or two quarterbacks transfer out, who's to say they wouldn't go after a Brock Vandegrift? Just hypothetically saying, there are rumors out there that he's probably going in the transfer portal because I think, is it Carson Beck is probably going to be their starter this year. So that'll be interesting to follow. But other than somebody like that, a five-star guy that just wants to jump on board, I think you're probably just going to play it out. But I do think you would look for a left tackle. I do think you would look for a wide receiver and for running backs. And then I think you're definitely looking to add positions across the board. And so Jaden Muskrat, I know you guys aren't as old as me, but when I think of Muskrat, I think of the Captain and Tennille from the 70s with Muskrat Love. That was a song. Muskrat, 6'3", 307, played in 20 games at Tulsa, started 11 games at right tackle. Last season, he's only allowed 3 sacks in 848 snaps. Going to be a lot of competition, though. Arkansas, Virginia Tech, Penn State, Auburn have offered. So we'll see what happens there. All right. So I was going to ask Mike this question, but I want to ask you guys that are in the Nana's Porch chat box, give me your top 3 players on offense and defense that really caught your eye. Okay. Give me those, because I kind of got in my mind who probably the top 3 guys would be. But for me, the top 3 guys that I liked I'm just going to lump these together. It's really 4 guys at 2 positions and then 1 other guy. So on offense, for me, is Vershawn Lee and Nick Gargiulo, because other than 1 high snap and then the 1 bad snap that Lenora Sellers made an unbelievable play on, I thought those guys, you never noticed them, which is exactly what you want from your center. Okay, and then it was Trey Knox and Joshua Simon, so the tight ends, and then obviously Lenora Sellers. He kind of stole the show in the second half. I thought Rattler was solid. I loved what I saw from Juice Wells, from Eddie Lewis, and from DJ Black. Okay, that's a guy that could do it for me. So on defense, I think Clint and I are simpatico, because for me is Elijah Davis. I think he's got 15 pounds to lose around the belly. He's got some bad weight there. You lean him up, and I think he's 265 or 270, and he is a 4-3 defensive end. He's explosive. He uses his hands really well. He's got great instincts. He was a defensive end in high school. I think that's the guy. I think he's a little more explosive than Tonka Hemingway, and I think Tonka at 285, 290 inside will just be a mismatch. Jalen Kilgore, have I mentioned how much I love that guy? I thought I did like Brian Thomas Jr. I think if you play more of where he's a buck, where he's a stand-up guy that's playing in space, and you've got a big nose guard like Xavier McLeod or Nick Barrett or maybe even Boogie Huntley in there. Jamal Weish is another guy. And then you got TJ Sanders and Tonka Hemingway if you're in a 3-man front. I think Brian Thomas Jr. can thrive in that. If you're in a traditional 4-2-5 or a four-man front, I think you want it to be Jordan Strong at defensive end, a trimmed down Elijah Davis at defensive end, unless you get a stud out of the transfer portal or Desmond Umeozulu is just too good to keep off the field. Okay, and then Boogie Huntley and Tonka Hemingway inside with Davis, Strong, Umeozulu, or a transfer portal. I think Elijah Davis can definitely play defensive end. Then you're going to have Mo Kaba, who will be back. You're going to have Stone Blanton. You're going to have Debo Williams, Pup Howard, okay, Jaron Willis, and you could add a guy in the transfer portal as well. Clint, I'm with you. I mean, Elijah Davis, I think Desmond Umeozulu will be a taller, more explosive version of him. And hopefully in the transfer portal, if you can add Derek McClendon and maybe one more guy, okay, I think that really gives you a lot of options to be able to mix and match and to play 3-4 and 4-2-5 or even 4-3, because I think, you know, Jaron Willis and Debo Williams are probably better Sam type linebackers right now. Depth at corner is going to be interesting because probably outside of your two starters, Anthony Rose was the most talented guy. He's hit the transfer portal because, quite frankly, his days at South Carolina were numbered. It just was not going to work out for him to stay after this latest incident and suspension. So I do like Emory Floyd. Kawan Banks could play there. Certainly Vakari Swain is coming in. But Judge Collier, I think, will play there. And Keenan Nelson Jr. So, I mean, you had your entire nickel brigade out for the spring game. Like Spalding was out, Keenan Nelson was out, and D'Angelo Gibbs was out. That's a guy. So, Clint, I mean, no doubt about it, Sterling Lucas is killing it. I mean, he's got South Carolina in the lead for Dylan Stewart. He's got South Carolina right there for King Joseph Edwards, for Justin Green. I mean, for a number of other guys. And so I am so fired up to have you guys in the Nana's Porch chat box. You know, Cameron Fountain, Jamonte Waller, who could be more of a linebacker, but could be an edge guy. I mean, there are a lot of dudes. And, hey, Clint, next season, in the 2024 season, I could definitely imagine Desmond Umeozulu as a sophomore and true freshman Dylan Stewart, the number one prospect in America, lining up on the edge at the same time. Probably got to beat out Elijah Davis to do it, but what if he's your third down guy and like Brad Lawing did with Clowney, you just moved Melvin Ingram inside and brought Clowney in to rush the passer. I mean, imagine if you took out Boogie Huntley, who you really don't have to, but you had Tonka Hemingway and Elijah Davis inside. And then you had Yumi Zulu and Dylan Stewart outside. Wowza. That would definitely be something else. And then maybe you blitz a guy like Jaron Willis, because that guy's speed and athleticism is ridiculous. They just got to coach him up. That would, as we go back into the Nana's Porch chat box, that would definitely make for some interesting competition with guys like Josiah Thompson, Cam Pringle, Mike Williams, Sidney Fugar, and Tyshawn Wanamaker, and Kason Henry. Let's not count out any of these guys either. Let's just not throw our current guys on the roster out the window, because hey, they're going to have more experience. They're going to have more time in Luke Day's strength and conditioning program, and they're going to be getting coached up. But, guys, I've been following recruiting since about 1980. Okay, 43 years, since I was 16 years old. And these offensive line classes that South Carolina is stacking, and potentially the defensive line classes, because let's face it, Elijah Davis, you definitely hit on him. Xavier McLeod, I think, is a future first-round NFL draft pick. You definitely hit on him. Okay. With what, Desmond Umeozulu. What if you add Jordan Davis, King Joseph Edwards, Dylan Stewart, and Denos White from up in Concord at defensive tackle? I mean, you see your developmental guys like DeAndre Martin, Jamal Weish, okay, those guys really taking a big step forward. Okay, even Demetrius Watson is a guy. I think Felix Hickson's probably the furthest away from contributing from that group, but it looks like you hit on that group too. So the future is definitely bright. So we are waiting on Brayden Lee's announcement. I'm assuming he is live on Instagram right now. I think here's one thing to talk about is Jordan Burch. Okay, I know it won't go away. It's been out there for a long time. We talked about it on the Garnet and Black Town Hall multiple times. I just don't see it happening. One, when you're out with Shane Beamer, you are definitely out, because there were a couple of guys that transferred they wanted to come back. They hit the portal. Shane Beamer just stopped taking their calls. So back in the Nana's Porch chat box, a poster on TBS said their godson is a running back from Mississippi State who is now in the portal. His name is Keon Roberson. So that could be a name to follow. Here it is. Mississippi State running back in the portal. 5'10", 195, sub 4'4". In the 40. I think you would definitely take a guy like that for depth. Here's the thing, though. I don't really think SEC guys, you'd have to get a waiver because SEC guys have already made their announcement. Like the portal, I think you have to be in the portal by February 1st. So unless you get a waiver, which perhaps you could at Mississippi State because of the untimely death of Mike Leach, having a new head coach, going through spring practice, that could definitely be something to follow. So I'm not going to get all excited on that one. But I do think there are other running backs. There are other guys that are jumping into the transfer portal that the Gamecocks will be involved with and will have a great chance with. So that will be determined. Women's basketball here, while we wait on the third welcome home reveal of the day. All right, so Gamecocks lose longtime Dawn Staley assistant Fred Shamil. He gets a head coaching job at Bowling Green. Dawn Staley goes out and gets Winston Gandy from Duke, who's one of the risers and one of the top recruiters and player development guys in college basketball. He spent 3 years in the NBA in player development. He coached the guards at Duke, one of which, Cheyenne Day-Wilson, who was the ACC Rookie of the Year. Gamecocks have somebody like that on the roster. Camila Cardoso, and Celeste Taylor, who was the ACC Defensive Player of the Year. If Taylor does not go ahead and commit to Ohio State this week, I think she could be coming in for a visit to South Carolina this weekend. So you've had Day Wilson. She's already visited. Gamecocks also had Oregon point guard and three-time All Pac-12 point guard Tahina Paopao. She's Polynesian. She's 5'9". She was the number 11 recruit in the country. This past season, she shot 43% from three, and 2 years ago, she shot 40% from three. She's an 88% free throw shooter. She averaged 13 points and 3.5 assists per game. She was on campus at South Carolina, as was former top 50 recruit Sakima Walker, who is from Columbus, Ohio. She has a connection to Zia Cook and Breezy Hall. They played against each other in AAU. She went to Rutgers. Unfortunately, had a battle with depression. She went to Northwest Florida State Junior College. They won the national championship. She was the National Junior College Player of the Year. She's 6'5". Her dad, Samaki Walker, was a college star who played in the NBA for years. This past season, in leading Northwest Florida State to the JUCO National Championship, she averaged almost 17 points per game, shot 60% from the field, was 10 of 19 from three, over 50%. I know it's a small sample size. 75% free throw shooter, 8.2 rebounds per game, and blocked 48 shots. I think she would be a great fit for this Gamecock roster. And there was a third visitor whose identity has not been revealed, but let's go out to the capital city and let's add my guy Mike Uva from Gamecock Central, who has been busy today with 3 welcome homes. And so, Mike, first of all, welcome into the program. Thanks for joining us. And so the $64,000 question is, you're sitting there with your nice button down on, your nice collared shirt, and your blazer. Is this Zoom attire with gym shorts?
Absolutely. It's a Watch Fox special. That's how I was able to get away with it. And then working up in Boston, you know, you go to a nicer station, they want to do the full body shot. So got to actually wear dress pants up there. But I can tell you that a lot of TV people behind the desk, they rock the shorts, especially down here in the South when you can get away with it because it gets hot in those studios.
All right. So, Mike.
Oh, and there it is.
I guess you have completed 3 videos.
There it is, Keith. Just happened.
All right, so is that Brayden Lee?
Brayden Lee from Maryland, 4-star defensive back. He is the second Maryland product to commit today publicly for South Carolina, and the third commitment of the day, which is just absolutely incredible. And the funny thing is, Kelvin Hunter, I know we'll get into some of this, he wasn't expecting to do it today, but he saw all the fun going on, and he's like, you know what, let's just do it today. And then Brayden Lee, he was going to wait actually till tomorrow, and he's like, you know what, let's just get in on it. So certainly a day Gamecock fans are going to remember for a long, long time, especially if this class of 24, which is panning out to be very special, already top 5, this could be a date people look back on and be like, wow, we remember that date, April 19th, 2023.
Yeah, so last night, you get 1 welcome home, then earlier for me, because I'm on Central Time, you get the second welcome home. Then Kelvin Hunter, he says, hey, I got a big announcement at noon. He tweets that out. Then Shane Beamer goes with the 3rd welcome home. Brian Dawn from 24/7 Sports, who covers the Northeast for that website, he quickly put up an article on 2 crystal ball picks for the Gamecocks, Mike Williams and Brayden Lee. And so all of these guys were in town for the spring game, Mike. And so I think the atmosphere, I think having the game at night, and I want to get your thoughts to this, but I think all of this has been very purposeful by Shane Beamer to get the night game, to have the bigger crowd, to be able to get more recruits in around the program, to have the build-up, to have the light show, right, with the lights inside Williams-Brice Stadium, the 2001. I mean, we even saw, like, Trey Knox. That was the first time he had seen the light show, and he was in awe of it and talking about it in his post-game interview. But I've said it, Shane Beamer, let's go back to Glengarry, Glenn Ross, the ABCs of sales, always be closing. Shane Beamer is always recruiting and closing deals with great atmospheres like Saturday night at Williams-Brice Stadium.
Yeah, there's no question about it. And, you know, that's something actually that I added in this latest breakdown video that we do with Gamecock Central for every commitment, that you have 3 players that have committed today. Have gone public with their commitments. All these players, they have told Shane Beamer within the last 24 hours that they wanted to commit to South Carolina. All 3 of those players were here over the weekend. Now, I've said it before, and I'll use the phrase Gamecock to try to keep it PG. But I mean, it's a Gamecock measuring contest when you're talking about spring ball attendance. It really means absolutely nothing. You could have 50,000 there, you could have 25,000 there. It really doesn't matter. The energy itself is what speaks volumes. And from talking to numerous recruits over the last, I'd say, 72 hours going back to this past weekend, that's what they're talking about. They're not concerned about the attendance and this and that. And I'm not going to sit here with a tinfoil hat and sit here and be like, I don't know if there was 51,000 there. I do think it's funny, though, that Clemson put out 50,000 and they upped them by 1,000, which was 1 point like this past season in football. But no, in all seriousness, though, playing at night, creating that atmosphere, a lot of those players are like, man, I just want to get back down here in the fall when this stadium is actually full for a game, instead of just seeing some of it filled up, which, of course, that lower bowl side on the home sideline was full. It was incredible. So there's no question. There is no question that, along with, we did an interview with Dante Reno last week. I've caught up. We've done interviews this week with some players that have already committed. We'll share those over the next couple of weeks. They've said the same thing. The guys that were committed, they went down there this weekend, Keith, this past weekend, with the mentality of, hey, we have to get some other guys to commit here. 3 guys have already committed today. I think they, so far, I think you could say they did their job pretty damn well, on top of what the coaching staff has done as well.
No doubt. I mean, I thought there was a possibility there could be a couple guys that would commit at the spring game, and there would be welcome homes on, late Saturday night or early Sunday morning. That was delayed by a couple of days, but not denied. And look, I think there are more guys that are close to jumping in the boat. I mean, you could go to right up I-85 from Greensboro to Burlington Cummings High School for 4-star wide receiver Jonathan Paylor. I think the Gamecocks are huge favorites for him. Been a lot of predictions cast for him, both by On3 and 24/7. And a pair of 4-star running backs, Daniel Hill from Meridian, Mississippi, who was in for the spring game. A lot of predictions rolling in for him. And 4-star running back Anthony Carey out of Tampa, Florida, 5'11", 195. And the one guy in Clint Morrison, he's on here in the Nana's chat box. Montario Hardesty's been that guy with the big question mark and kind of the albatross hanging around his neck, because your running backs coach needs to be one of your best recruiters. And South Carolina struggled at running back, but now you're the favorite for 2 4-star running backs as well, and more guys on defense. And hey, let's stay in the DMV just for a second. The number 1 player by On3 Sports, Dylan Stewart, very close with Brayden Lee and Big Mike Williams, as well as Desmond Umeozulu, Zabari Sandy, and that guy that runs track, who's also pretty good at football, Nicholas Harbor, the 5-star signee from February. I mean, South Carolina is really doing what Frank McGuire did in the late 60s and early 70s. He built that Underground Railroad from New York City. Shane Beamer's doing it from the DMV to Columbia, South Carolina, even a hashtag DMV Forever to Thee. I mean, I have to think South Carolina puts, I think, these guys really on top of last year, and along with Sterling Lucas, who's becoming a rising star in recruiting, I think this really makes South Carolina extremely formidable when it comes to landing Dylan Stewart.
Well, they all connect with each other, right? And you mentioned just that pipeline that's being created in the DMV area and the success South Carolina has had, especially in the state of Maryland, right? 2 commits today, 6 commits from the state of Maryland going back to last year's recruiting class. What it reminds me a lot of is what Steve Spurrier was able to do when he arrived in South Carolina with being able to take recruits out of the state of Florida. And we've heard that from so many players that played during that time period and how the impact of seeing one guy go made them want to go as well. Shaq Wilson has talked about that a lot. We saw that with Steven Garcia. Knowing that some of these guys were up here already, he's like, man, I know that guy. Man, I went to one of the same camps as them. Or, he plays in the town over. I might not have gone up against him, but I've heard about him. I've read about him in the newspaper. So there's certainly something to be said when you do have that familiarity. And to be able to go up into the DMV area, an area where South Carolina, they struggled at with recruiting when Will Muschamp was here. Muschamp did a very good job of bringing in some talent, obviously not on to this level, but we saw that, right? A lot of players have gone on to the NFL. I say that because for whatever reason, Muschamp struggled to get that area in particular. There was a couple players, of course, right? Marshawn Lloyd coming down here from the DMV area, but we haven't seen this. We haven't seen this ever from South Carolina to be able to go up in that area. And I think a lot of that has to do with just Beamer's familiarity with that area because of his father, right? Having coached at Virginia Tech, knowing the talent. I mean, coaches across the country, they know the talent that comes out of the DMV. But if you're able to go up there from South Carolina, I think it really sends a message to the rest of the country because that's an area. Never mind the fact that the ACC, it's right there for them. Never mind the fact that the Big Ten, it's right there for them. But in the past, schools like Miami, right, the schools that are a little bit further away in the ACC, the schools that are like Florida State, they've been really successful recruiting that area over the last 2 decades. South Carolina is sending a message, and it's loud and clear that they want that area. They want to build pipelines. And those pipelines so far, Keith, they have certainly helped because these guys know each other. And I would not be shocked. I would not be shocked to see Dylan Stewart eventually commit to South Carolina. I would say USC is the clear favorites right now.
I agree. I mean, look, Torian Gray is another guy you cannot underestimate.
Absolutely.
His connections in the DMV. Pete Limbo has been doing a magnificent job from the DMV north into Pennsylvania, New Jersey, up into New England as well. I think the Gamecocks are going to see, they may reap rewards from that this year. You've already got Dante Reno from up there, your quarterback for this class. Jordan Thomas, a big defensive tackle from Don Bosco Prep in New Jersey, who has strong ties. He grew up in Eastover, which is where Lower Richland High School is. His grandmother still lives there. He was on campus this past weekend. He's been on campus last summer. They're in the mix with him. You look at Keenan Nelson Jr. out of that Philadelphia area, St. Joseph Prep. They signed a wide receiver from, I believe, is McDevitt High School that won the state championship this past season. I mean, they are really expanding South Carolina's footprint in the eastern seaboard, particularly north of the Mason-Dixon line.
No question about it. And I'm glad you brought up Torian Gray because the last, I'd say, month in particular, we've heard nothing but endorsement after endorsement. It started with Shane Beamer calling him, and I'm paraphrasing, the best defensive back coach in the country. And the fact that he works with not just corners, but he also works with safeties, which for Power 5, I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but it doesn't happen as often as you would think it does. So the fact that he's doing such a good job of just not only being able to get the most out of these players, but he's doing it very quickly. I mean, think about it. He's been here for 2 years. Think of the work that he's done and it's not to take away from the talents of the players by any means, but he's helped turn guys like Jalen Foster into an All-American, a guy like Carlins Patel, a D2 guy, into a starter who eventually ended up signing with the Steelers, a guy like Cam Smith who was well on his way to be able to help sharpen his tools, developed him as a strong nickel, especially Cam's junior year, which is only going to help his draft stock. Darius Rush, I mean, goodness. I mean, there's probably a player or two out there that has climbed very high from last fall to now, but Rush has to be in the top 5 for the jump that he's going to make and the draft spot that he's going to go in a couple weeks. I just think it's absolutely incredible the job that he's done, and you hear players talk about how he develops relationships and he knows everything about you. And I know it's really cliche. It's like, oh, coaches know that. It's just like, you'd be surprised because as soon as they recruit you, as soon as you're on campus, a lot of these places, you're just a number. You're just a number. And I'm not saying that South Carolina doesn't treat it like that because, again, you got to prove yourself once you get there. But there's something to be said about truly showing that love and knowing your players. And Gray does all of that. He checks every box off. And I'll tell you what, it's going to get tougher and tougher each year to keep him here. And I know Gamecock fans don't like hearing that, but that's just the reality. And that's not a bad thing. When you hear that you have a good program, right? What do you think? Coaches, naturally, they're getting reached out to. We've seen it already. Justin Stepp being reached out by Florida. I mean, it happens. So I'm telling you right now, South Carolina needs to do everything they can to keep Torian Gray here because he's a hell of a coach, he's a hell of a person, and he's certainly making a big, big impact in recruiting.
I mean, Mike, no doubt about it. All you have to do is look at DQ Smith and Nick Eamon-Warry. No other Power 5 offers. And they're both starting as true freshmen and performing at a high level. And I think Judge Collier's the next guy in that group, unheralded because he did not play at a South Point or a Northwestern, played at a charter school, comes in mid-year, 6'2", 190, 4'4", 40. You hear nothing but rave reviews about him. Jalen Kilgore, who I thought was vastly underrated. He's probably going to be your third safety this year and a guy that I think has all SEC written all over him for the future. Now you add Brayden Lee, one of the top corners in the country, Kelvin Hunter out of West Florence High School, who's a guy who's got a lot of DJ Swearinger in him, a little undersized at 5'11", 180, but a guy that will absolutely knock your block off. You just continue to see Torian Gray building this secondary.
And I think the other thing too, Keith, is that they've done such a good job with keeping talent here in state, and I should say identifying talent, especially at that position, right? You think of Nick Eamon-Warry, you think of DQ Smith. I mean, what a phenomenal story it is with DQ Smith, a guy that played quarterback at a very, very, very proud program like Spring Valley. And to have him come over, I think he was a gray shirt at first, gets in here, and he's worked his tail off to become a starter in the secondary. Did some great things, of course, last year. You saw that in the Gator Bowl, and he's going to play a big, big role this year. So it's – look, I've said this before in the past, and I think people are going to start to realize it now if they were a little hesitant or they got upset by it. You're not going to be able to just win with talent from South Carolina. I understand people get all worked up about, making sure that you keep guys home. No question about it. Well, Beamer's been able to do just that. With the signing of Kelvin Hunter today, you have the 4 top prospects from the state of South Carolina. But on top of that, you're going into areas like we've talked about, that DMV area. They've gone down to Florida. They're going into Georgia. I think of a guy like Wendell Gregory. I mean, they're going all over the place. You can't win with just South Carolina talent. But the talent that is there, the top talent, Beamer's making damn sure that they don't leave the state. And I think what you are going to eventually get into, if you're able to continue to make waves like this, Keith, you're going to be able to start recruiting nationally. And while South Carolina, again, they're doing it, in state, they're working inside out, they're not exactly there yet on the level of recruiting like a Clemson or an Ohio State, but they're working towards that direction. And how do you land players on that level, at that caliber? Consistency. So this year, if you're able to at least get 8 wins in the regular season, you show that consistency. This recruiting class for 2024, my goodness. But again, it just comes down to consistency. You do that, everything else is going to take care of itself.
No doubt about it. So, hey, Mike, thanks for jumping in. It's about to get real loud because my yard guys are here early. But we appreciate you taking the time to jump in, and can't wait to have you back on to talk future of women's basketball. Had some stuff for the transfer portal with that, but we'll jump into that next time. So thanks for joining us for Gamecock Pod Live next Wednesday. Brad Crawford from 24/7 Sports will be in, and in an hour, I'll be interviewing Kelvin Roller and Josiah Thompson. We'll have that up tomorrow. And so, Mike, thanks again and always for being so generous with your time. And we'll just say until tomorrow, God bless and go Gamecocks.
How about them Celtics?
And the Seas, taking it to the Hawks. No doubt about it. All right, I am, and we are out of here.